Hello and welcome to the CFB edition of the Super Show. I'm your host, Walt Waddell, aka Deuce85, and I'm joined tonight by a special guest, partner in crime, who writes up the Saturday evening slate for us, and he's a Discord warrior like myself and a JRP truther. My good friend Jake Kucheck. I call him Kucheck like I'm his gym teacher, but smart guy, Jake. I'm really excited that you're joining us tonight. Hopefully, we'll be doing more shows together here as the last couple weeks of the season. But how are you feeling about things, man?
I'm glad to be here, getting towards the end of CFB, and it's been a grind, but I'm feeling pretty good about this weekend.
Heck yeah. So we have a 13 gamer on DraftKings. It was a 14 gamer originally, kind of an ode to last year. We have a cancellation due to COVID. Cal football team is having some issues, so that Cal USC game has been canceled. FanDuel still has a 14 gamer, but they do an all-day thing where some of those games bleed into the afternoon mid-slate for DraftKings, so there'll be some overlap there. We're mainly going to focus on DraftKings. If you guys have FanDuel questions, feel free to ask those if you're watching live or on demand. We'll get them answered for you as we go. Otherwise, in the article that releases, I will talk about a FanDuel core as usual. We're going to do the tried and true method. For those who haven't seen the Super Show before, we do game by game, giving out thoughts. We're going to switch every other, so I'll talk about a game. Then Jake will jump in if he has any thoughts. Then he'll cover the game. That way we're not just kind of rehashing stuff and wasting your guys' time. At the end of the game by game, we will be giving a three-man core for DraftKings. Just some three players that we're looking at right now. 36 hours from now, Saturday morning might come. We might change our thoughts. That happens sometimes. And then at the very end, we'll talk about PrizePicks, because PrizePicks is a very good site to use. I know it's not in every state yet, but their football numbers this year have been very, very soft. Typically, when we give those numbers, they change the next day. Not just necessarily because of us, but when there's a soft line. So you guys want to hit those PrizePicks numbers, as early as you can. Jake, without any further ado, you ready to just jump in here and start talking some college football?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Cool. All right. So first game on the slate, Mississippi State versus Auburn. I have that as a -5.5 for Auburn right now with a 50 over under, which may actually be a little high for this game. Lately, the Auburn games haven't been that great for fantasy or scoring in general. It's not really a game I'm super excited about. However, there is some cheap price guys here. And bear with me as I pull up prices. Dylan Johnson is only 3.9 this week compared to Jokavius Marks. Not a great, spot for him necessarily. Auburn's rush defense has been very stout, but Dylan is still seeing 8 to 10 rushes, and he's very heavily involved in the passing game. We know Mike Leach runs that air raid offense. When he was with the Cougars, the running backs catching a lot of passes. Max Borghi was a guy that we used 2 years ago quite a bit. Dylan Johnson and Marks get a lot of receiving work, and because of that, they tend to have good fantasy value. So I don't think it would be a spot I would waste in my main lineup. You guys hear me talk about main a lot, but at 3.9, that is something that stuck out to me just because he's almost $3K cheaper than Marks, who, barely has more touches than him. He's roughly 8 to 11 carries as well, 5 to 6 receptions. He did have 20 carries a couple weeks ago against Kentucky, but other than that, you see they're pretty even most of the times. As far as the rest of their receivers, Jaden Wally, who was a star last year, he's priced at only 4.8 there. Before last game, he had 3 straight of 5 receptions or more, double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. So I do like this spot for GPPs for Wally as well. But like I said, Auburn is just really slowing games down. They're playing very physical, and games typically by halftime are like 10-3 or 9-6. So it really hasn't been that sexy of a spot. I do like the side for Auburn against Mississippi State, though, who, they try to play that faster pace. I wouldn't be using a Bo Nix type, even though a couple years ago I was high on Bo Nix. My old site used to make fun of me for it, but I'm not really on him anymore. I do still like Tank Bigsby as a guy, who just doesn't get enough touches when he should. He should be getting 20 touches a game, if not more. And it seems like they just don't use him enough as like they should. So not really that exciting of a game. I have much more to say about the other games on the docket. Is there anything here before we move on to West Virginia that, you see sticking out, or this matchup actually looks better than it is? Kind of feels to me like a Virginia basketball game where I'm expecting low scoring, kind of a slower pace. Somebody will come out of here with a high score, but it's just not that sexy.
Yeah, that's a pretty good analogy, the Virginia basketball game. I'm waiting for a time that I can play Tank Bigsby, because I really do like his skill set, and he seemed to be getting a decent amount of volume throughout the year. But I don't see it in this one. I don't think this is the spot. I think Bo Nix is usually good for maybe one ceiling game a year, and I think we've already seen that. So I probably wouldn't be doing a whole lot of Bo Nix, and I agree. You would expect a lot more out of a Mike Leach offense for fantasy purposes, but it hasn't really come together, and against Auburn, probably not the spot.
For sure. All right, so moving on to West Virginia, Kansas State. We have -6 for the Kansas State, 47 over under. Jake, tell us about this one. Is Deuce going loose against West Virginia, or we got to get away from that 10K?
Yeah, 10K so obviously it's pretty low total, and we've seen K-State play pretty well defensively the last couple of weeks. Weren't really playing the best teams in the world. Had TCU and all the drama that's going on over there, and Kansas is kind of in a permanent state of being out of sorts. So yeah. I don't really know that we're seeing the true K-State defense, and I know you're talking about Deuce, and we'll get to that in a minute. But who I'm interested in terms of price point is really Letty Brown. And being on the West Virginia side of things, 6,100 on DK is the lowest price point that we've seen Letty Brown at this year. And I understand K-State's been good on defense the last couple of weeks, but I don't know that it's deserving of a floor price for Letty Brown. And I think you're a Letty Brown guy too. So this might be an interesting spot to take a shot on that side. And then, on the K-State side, Deuce is Deuce, and he's extremely talented and extremely explosive and extremely the focal point of the offense and all that. But he's also extremely expensive. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is probably the highest we've seen Deuce and may ever see Deuce in terms of a DraftKings price. So I'm hesitant to want to pay the ceiling price, right? We've seen all the production happen. We can rely on a good amount of production happening, but I don't know that I want to pay through the roof for it. When it comes to the passing games for these two teams, I could not be less interested in both the quarterback scenarios and the pass catchers. It's really just the two running backs in this game. And do you want Letty Brown at the floor price for Letty Brown, or do you want Deuce Vaughn at the ceiling price for Deuce Vaughn? And we'll get to it later in the show. I do have some running backs that I feel pretty strongly about on this slate that I think have at least as much, if not significantly more upside, at least when you look at point per dollar than Deuce might. So if I'm taking someone from this game, it's probably going to be Letty Brown. That said, if you want to play Deuce, he's amazing. And if you can find the salary to get there, and you've got, the trio of 3K wide receivers that are all going to put up points, and you can jam in as much salary as you want at running back, play Deuce. That's great. But once you're considering price, I don't know that I'm going to get there. If a bunch of value opens up, that could change, but I'm probably leaning a little bit more toward Letty right now.
Yeah. No, and I agree. Deuce, we've been riding with him for like a month, ever since I was playing him. I'm sure you were before I came to FTN, but he's pretty much been a weekly staple for us. They finally priced him accordingly. The beginning of the season, we were playing Bijan Robinson all the time. Then he was priced accordingly. So I feel like Deuce has kind of hit that. He's plateaued at the Bijan level to where he's going to score 2 touchdowns, but
he's even pricier than Bijan has been, right? So it's like I don't know. He's great. I don't see him getting to that price level and then smashing through it, right? He could very much make value, but to smash value, you were talking about like 300 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns. That's a tough ask for literally anyone.
Yeah, definitely. His receiving work makes him even more appealing, but I agree. I think that we've got to step off now and let other people chase it, because it's going to hamstring the rest of our build. He still might, score 2 times, get 100 yards, 60 receiving yards, whatever, but it's that opportunity cost.
There's plenty of other people that have an opportunity to get to that too. It won't cost you quite as much.
Yeah, so I'm definitely with you on Letty Brown. And the Kansas State, their rushing defense, they're giving up approximately like 177, 178 yards per game on the ground. So definitely a spot to potentially look at him at 6-1. And I think people are going to maybe overlook him, even though like just 2 of his last 3 games, he's been over 30 DK points. So
yeah, a lot of people will, take a look at what not even the number, just the color of what the DK defense ranking is, right? Like, so, and they'll see that red ranking on the Kansas State rushing defense. Like, oh, I can't play Letty Brown now. And I think that's a mistake, because it's a very misleading thing to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, I love when that shows that when that's still a good matchup, because people are going to actually look at that. All right, so Oklahoma versus Baylor is next up. We have the Sooners -5.5, over under 62, which is pretty typical at this point for Oklahoma games. We know at this point they're going to be playing semi-fast paced offense since they switched from Spencer Rattler to Caleb Williams. Rattler was getting all this Heisman love at the beginning of the season, and I was doing preview shows for my last site, and I just couldn't get my head around him being a Heisman guy. I know he was good, but I didn't actually think he would be this bad either. But it doesn't surprise me to see him not at the helm of this offense, because he was really struggling. I'm surprised he hasn't transferred yet. But Caleb Williams, 10K. Very tough price to pay. At this point, you guys know I'm a pretty big proponent, or the people in our Discord, that I'm on main slates. I love running the 4 running back thing. It's a pretty exotic thing at this point. People don't really like it, or they don't understand it. But lately, we've been able to get 4 running backs into our lineup a lot and profiting pretty well. We might not bank necessarily, but turning a profit is very important. We're doing that a lot. So for me, I haven't been paying these 10K prices for quarterbacks. If I were to pay 10K, Caleb Williams would definitely be a guy to consider. I mean, since stepping in 7 games, he's over 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns, just the 1 interception, which is important, and then nearly 300 yards on the ground. So you got that dual threat, ability there. Going up against Baylor, the Baylor defense, they're kind of a weird. They're good, but they do get gashed, and they kind of get gashed on the ground a little bit more than people realize. So I could see Caleb actually do pretty decent on the rushing side of things. Well, as well, question maybe getting there on the on this arm, and it could be a game like Sam Howell a couple weeks ago, where Howell wasn't really throwing touchdowns, but he rushed for like 2 or 3 and was just going nuts. Of course, I didn't play him in that game, and he still got the value because of his rushing stuff. So I could still see Caleb Williams at the 10K, getting there, but I'm not necessarily looking at him. Kennedy Brooks' price is starting to come down a little bit. I do think at 7-7, he's a good GPP play against Baylor. As I said, their rushing defense has been beatable. They're not the softest unit, but they're also not the toughest unit as well. So I could definitely see him getting work enough to pay that price off. There was some concern about, Eric Gray getting carries, which really hasn't happened. Knowles, not really. It's just basically Brooks. Even with Major, coming back from his little simpatico thing, he came back and had 5 carries. So I'm not really worried about him not getting the looks. It's just a matter of you think he's going to score the touchdowns, or it's going to be Caleb Williams who steals. As far as Oklahoma receivers go, they're one. I've been saying this all year that I can't really trust them in my main lineup. Marvin Mims is a guy that people have been waiting for or trying to make happen for a very long time. When he does have a good week, everybody takes their VLAPs about it. I know last week he had a really good game, but and then he shows out against Kansas with 1 catch for 14. There's just really no consistency there, which is really what gives me, my issue. He's 4th on the team in targets with 31 as well. So he's not even like the WR1 really. He did, and that's in 9 games. Jaden Hasselwood has the most targets with 48. And then Michael Woods, who has missed 2 games, has 35. Mario Williams, who's missed 1, has 35. So Mims, can definitely break it with a long one. But lately with these receivers, I've been wanting kind of those possession guys, slot guys, the David Bells of the world. Last week, we actually paid up at wide receiver for once with Bell, Dotson, and that really worked out for us, JSN at the end. So I'm kind of leaning towards potentially trying to do that again this week, and that doesn't involve Marvin Mims for me, and a 6K Hazelwood, not at all either. But Mario Williams at 4K is definitely intriguing. He's coming off that 5-100 game against Texas Tech. I could see him, doing well and potentially being a main lineup guy if you decide to pay up at quarterback or running back and you need some of these cheapy receivers. I will say paying down at receiver hasn't been very fun this year. Those guys are really not paying out very well. Last year it seemed like we could get some 3K guys and really hit and get a little bit of good positive variance. But this year, with Baylor, what was Drew Estrada week when he was kind of semi-chalky and he ended up getting like 2 targets and like 1 catch, no catch. And there's been several times where that's happened. So I am a little leery of it, but Mario Williams has had a couple games this year where he's looked good. And on the Baylor side for wide receiver, it's kind of the same thing for me. Tyquan Thornton has looked really good recently, and he's really ascended as the number one guy. 66 targets in 9 games. RJ Sneed, 43 targets. So you see there's a really big discrepancy from Thornton to Sneed there. And right when I was ready to kind of write Sneed off back in week 7 against BYU, he had a nice 672 game, and then against Texas 894 and a touchdown. But then against TCU, he went back to being non-existent again. So again, 4 or 5 guy, a guy who could really be the highest scoring receiver for them this week. Oklahoma's secondary is very beatable. People sometimes forget that. I could see this being a really good game for the receivers, but do I trust them in my main lineup? Probably not. And then Abram Smith is a guy that we love. His price is always in that low 7K range. He, I'd say against TCU, we probably expected more. Didn't score. He kept getting vultured, which happens. Edner got him. He did rush for over 120 yards, though, against that TCU defense. So I definitely like him. I don't know that he's going to end up as like my trio of running backs because I'm really set on at least 2 of these guys. I fear the industry will be as well, which I don't like, but sometimes you just got to eat the chalk when it's that good. So Smith's probably like a top 5 type 6 guy for me. He'll be like an alt team play, but maybe not my main. Just because I worry about Ebner. Bohannon does run and steal in the goal line, and then if this ends up having to be a passing game, with Oklahoma's offense being so good, then he might get phased out, or the game script might not be positive for him. So it's a good game for GPPs to mini stack. Oklahoma games typically are. It seems like in the first half, Oklahoma games are kind of tilting, and then the second half they just go completely bonkers. So I think you can get some pieces here and feel pretty good about it, but I don't know if I see any real main team plays here. Do you feel anything that's kind of sticking out here?
It's tough. My thought on Oklahoma wide receivers is if you can pick the Oklahoma wide receiver that's going to go off that particular week, you should be doing something much more important than picking college football players.
Playing the lotto.
It's just there's really no rhyme or reason. I'm a Hazelwood guy, but I liked him more when he was at like 4-1. Paying that much for him is too much. If I had any interest in any particular play in this game, it's probably Abram Smith. The fact that he did disappoint to a degree last week, he was okay, but he wasn't what we want to see from one of the church members, if you will. I think the fact that he did disappoint will kind of take people off him, and the fact that there are, like you said, so many better, or I guess more popular running back plays. I kind of like that. I kind of like that people are trending elsewhere, and especially for GPP, I think that there's going to be something to that. Oklahoma, not the best defense, and I think that they're going to see that there's a lot of value in kind of pounding the rock, and he was good every time they gave him the ball. He was gashing. So I don't know why they didn't run him a little bit more last week. That's neither here nor there. That week's in the past, but I think if I'm locked in on anyone from this game, it's probably him. And then, like you said, if you have a ton of extra salary, and you didn't use it on Deuce, then Caleb is a good place to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. A nice thing about Abram Smith, he has 6 receptions his last 3 games too, so he's starting to catch the ball a little bit. But yeah, that last week game was painful because I had the Baylor -7 in like every parlay, so that was painful.
I'm with you. I'm right there with you. I think we both expected Baylor to take care of business against a TCU team that we thought was hitting a rough patch, and it didn't happen.
Yep, you just never know sometimes. All right, next game, SMU versus UCF. I have SMU -7, 61.5 over under. SMU games tend to be pretty well. They were in the beginning of the year, pretty high scoring. Lately, they've been a little sloppy. What do you got for us on this one?
Okay, so higher total. We like that. Fairly tight spread. We like that. That said, there's kind of some landmines, right? So we want to think that through before we just say, okay, we're going to game stack this and then count all our money. On the SMU side, Tanner Mordecai is maybe a top 7 to 10 quarterback in all of college football, at least in my opinion. And he's got this ridiculous trio of pass catchers. Throw in Calcaterra at tight end. He's phenomenal. The price isn't too bad, but there was some smoke earlier this week from Sonny Dykes that he's going to try to get Preston Stone into the game.
I'm so glad you brought that up. You know your stuff, man. You're the man.
And my goodness, like, this guy's having an amazing season. I understand Preston Stone is an amazing recruit, and you want to get him involved, and you want to keep him from transferring, right? Like,
yep.
I totally get it from a coaching perspective, but from a DFS perspective, I was pretty interested in Tanner Mordecai when pricing came out, and once you see that, it certainly gives you pause, right? So that's a little bit of a tough one. Now, will it lower ownership? Yeah, it'll probably lower ownership, but maybe you should be part of those people that are lowering the ownership, because if we see, like, a 60-40 split between Tanner Mordecai and Preston Stone, Tanner Mordecai is not going to get it done for you, or he'll have to be extremely efficient in order to do so at that price tag, right? So that's one of the landmines I could see people stepping on, because you see that matchup, it's juicy. And, obviously, if you can include a quarterback in a juicy matchup with some receivers with a pretty narrow, I guess, production chart on the SMU side, like it's flowing to one of 4 pass catchers and really one of 3, and there's an alpha in that. It's tempting, but you do want to consider that. So onto those pass catchers, Danny Gray's kind of been the alpha of late. Got in the end zone twice last week. He's seen plenty of volume. Rashay Rice, Reggie Roberson Jr., I don't want to say that, one is really better than the other. I kind of look at them similarly in terms of their production this year. I think Roberson obviously has more of the pedigree, and he was like an 8 or 9K receiver before he got injured. And so I was expecting a little bit more from him this year, but it's been kind of mostly Danny Gray. But those two are also pretty cheap. I've got Roberson at 4,800. That's a pretty fair price to pay. And obviously, if you're taking the pass catchers, doesn't matter who's throwing them passes, they're gonna catch passes, right? So if I'm in on the SMU offensive side, it's probably going to be through one of those 3 or 4, if you're counting Calcaterra, pass catchers. Probably not going to Mordecai. Then in the running game, I couldn't tell you what's going on with Bentley, right? He was incredibly impressive up until he got hurt, and now he's hurt, and maybe he's not hurt. We never really know ahead of time what's going on with Siggers and Bentley. My thought is I'm probably going to stay away from all that unless we get some, red signal blinking. Bentley is a go. He's going to get 80% of the snaps at 3,700. Well, yeah, then I'm locking Bentley in every single lineup because that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But the bottom line is we really don't know. And Siggers is too high in terms of price and also in terms of opportunity cost to really get too involved there. I'm probably not going to go that direction. I'm probably going to be in on at least one of the pass catchers, if not sprinkling the others through multiple lineups. And if I can get to Gray, that's great, but I'll probably also take Roberson at that discount as well. And then on the UCF side, more landmines that we want to avoid, right? So we know Dylan Gabriel is probably not back. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did we hear Dylan Gabriel might be back?
Nah.
I don't think so. So we don't have Dylan Gabriel. So that offense is not what it could be. And so what it has been is the Ryan O'Keefe show. And at 7,200, if we know that Jalen Robinson is going to be out, the Ryan O'Keefe show may continue, and I think SMU's been pretty beatable in the secondary. So I wouldn't mind if we know for sure that Jalen Robinson is going to be out, continuing with that Ryan O'Keefe play. He's been getting a ton of volume, even if the quarterback play isn't what we wanted. Now Jalen Robinson's back. He's pretty cheap. He's 5.9, 5,900. I don't know what your thoughts are on playing a receiver that's just back from injury, but they don't take as many hits as running backs do. And so if he's back and we're confident in his snap share and him being fully able to play, that becomes a pretty intriguing play if we know for sure that he's available. And then Bowser, love the kid. Was getting more volume early in the season. I don't know that we can get to Bowser in this spot. I feel kind of the same way that I do about Siggers, that the price is up there enough that I just have so many other spots I would like to go from backs that are getting high volume and probably are going to be a little bit more efficient than Bowser in this spot.
Yeah, no, I agree. And he has Richardson starting to pilfer like 7 to 10 of his carries too.
Yeah,
so.
That's the other thing. The volume is also trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Right? Well, if he was getting 30 touches, sure, I might be interested, but we don't have that Bowser anymore.
Yeah. And I agree on the receiver side. Ryan O'Keefe has been awesome. I used him a couple of times in midseason when his price was cheaper. They haven't been on the slate as much lately, but that Memphis game, man, he looked really good, and he hasn't been stepping off the gas at all. He's having the Wop Fillier type games where he had 11 receptions for 94 yards. Last year, Wop had that like 14 catch, it's like an 18 catch game or something where he had like 60 yards. He's been getting a lot of PPR work, so I definitely like him. But yeah, if Robinson is back, and it sounds like he might be, he's been a full participant. You have to at least consider him at 5'9". I don't know if he'd become a main team play for me, because I am leery about guys who are coming off of semi-long-term injuries at first, because a lot of this coach speak you can't trust. They might come in and say, oh, he's a full go, like they said with Bentley a couple weeks ago, right, for SMU, and then he doesn't see any work.
Yeah, no, it would be a very GPP move to play Robinson, but they were also talking about getting him involved last week, right? So yeah, he may be ahead of schedule, and they were just kind of waiting to get him in. Who even knows? But yeah, I kind of would rather see Robinson out, so I at least know what to do with O'Keefe, sure. Right? So that's a piece of news I'm very interested in.
Yeah, because I mean, targeting against SMU in the secondary is a good move, especially with O'Keefe. And then, yeah, I'm glad you touched on the quarterback situation. I knew you wouldn't miss that because you don't miss anything. But, yeah, that just takes me off of Mordecai. I haven't really been a big Mordecai guy lately anyways. I mean, I think he's good, but I've been kind of getting away from him a bit just because he's usually priced out for me. But, yeah, if he's going to be splitting, even if it's like 80, 20, 70, 30 kind of thing, that's enough to really just kind of pull me away because he's almost 9K. That continuity, I mean, I'm kind of big on continuity a little, but like you said, at the end of the day, a receiver is a receiver. And if Stone has, kind of a simplified version of the playbook, then it would be fine. I don't think they'd be having him run all these exotic routes, but then again, he's so highly touted. I don't know a ton about Stone's profile. Is he more of a dual threat or more of a pocket passer? That from what I read, it seemed like he could run too. So that's another thing that.
So yeah, so if who knows how much of it he's going to get, but if he comes in and he ends up being a dual threat, then maybe we're off Danny Gray a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could see Roberson, whenever he goes under 5K, he typically becomes pretty popular. So I could see him kind of shoot up there. I want some piece of this game, but it's very unclear to me at this time what that.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to this game that will probably be clear as we approach kickoff. But we definitely have to keep an eye on it.
For sure. All right. Next game here is Rutgers versus Indiana. Some people might hear that and say, it's 7-point spread for Indiana, 43.5 over under. So, not a lot of expected points. I don't think people will be looking at this, but I do think there's some spots to look at. Indiana defensively, they've been a lot better against the run, but not quite as good against the pass. So they're giving up about 250 yards passing right now. And I think that there's talk of Noah Vedral. He wants to play. He's saying he's going to play. And obviously that's a good thing because he's better than whatever option they have. And he really likes Bo Melton. And I really like Bo Melton. He's only 5K and Melton was hurt earlier this year when I had him, whatever. But when he's in the game, he gets peppered heavily with targets. He leads the team with 68 in 8 games, 44 catches, 480 yards, 3 touchdowns. So, he is their guy. He performs when fully healthy, when he has his normal quarterback, like a 7K guy pretty frequently. He has a couple 20, 25s, 27s in there on DK, but you're really looking at a guy with a floor of like a 5 and a 5 catches, 60 yards, which is not horrible at 5K in this particular matchup. Now, Indiana, they don't play super fast. They like to run the ball. They have a good running back who can chew up clock, so that's obviously concerning. Also, Cruikshank has been banged up. Oh, he's out for the season. Okay, so their next guy up, who's been a stud, Aaron Cruikshank, is out. So that's more pressure on Melton, more targets. Shameen Jones was a guy last year that people liked. He's only 3-1. He'll have to step up too. So he could potentially be in play at 3-1 as well. But I'm a really big Bo Melton fan in general. So I'm probably going to be looking at him at 5K. He's not a priority or anything like that, but I like that range for wide receivers where they're kind of in between. They haven't had their best game since earlier this season, but they're not having horrific games. They're just they're putting out that 8, 9, 10 fantasy point type of thing, and they're just on a verge of a breakout. So I really feel like that's the case for him, and especially with Noah saying that he wants to play. I know he has a doubtful tag right now on DK, but they're not always up to date. So there's a good chance he plays, or at least he's talking like it. So if he does, I like that play a lot. And then potentially, like I said, if you need to punt wide receiver, Shameen Jones was a guy that a lot of us liked last year, and he does well when he's given extra snaps. As far as running backs go, like I said, they're only giving up about 133 on the ground per game. Pacheco at 4.1 is kind of cheap, but work-wise, he had 21 against Illinois, but that is a team that gives up a lot on the ground, and he still only had 91 yards, so he's kind of a plotter. So I'm not really looking at the running game here. It would just be receivers. And then on the Indiana side, what is going on with Ty Freifogel, man? The quarterback situations has been rough, so I gotta give that to him. Our guy Penix has been injured most of the season. Tuttle went out. Then he had Donovan McCulley, who's kind of more of a runner. I know he had 242 passing a couple weeks ago against Maryland, but everyone does. But he's having a struggle this year, and he had such a good season last year, and it was talk of him leaving, and he decided to come back, and it's like his draft stock has tanked, and it's really no fault of his own. But it's really come to a head with last week's game of 2 targets, 0 catches, 1 carry for 1 yard, and he's only priced at 4.6. If like the end of last year with what Freifogel was doing, if I told you, hey, by week 11, 12, 13, he's going to be 4.6, and you're probably not going to want to use him, you would probably think I'm crazy, right?
Yeah, I'm a Ty Freifogel guy, and it's disappointing. It's just disappointing to see him not getting the same kind of target share and not being able to convert it and not getting the efficiency, like just disappointing across the board. Still hoping for that one big game, right? You still know that the talent is there, but the quarterback play is hampering him a ton.
Yeah, and he had a good thing going there for a while when Tuttle was under center and Penix was kind of coming back. He had week 4, 16 targets, week 5, 10, week 7, 11. But since then, in 2 of the last 3 games, he's had 2 targets and 3 targets. Hit a 9 wedged in there against Maryland. Like I said, kind of everyone does well against Maryland.
Right.
But yeah, it's crazy to look at that price and say, I don't know that I could trust him in my cash game. And it's really no fault of his own. So I guess it's going to have to do with the QB situation. Because I've heard there's talk of potentially one of Tuttle or Penix coming back. I haven't dug into it fully, but I just, there's a lot going on, of course, but it looks like there's a potential for them to do so. They're all under 5K, which is really interesting against Rutgers. I think there's a lot of GPP value here. If you're running alt lineups, getting a starting QB under that price against a Rutgers team that can give up points. So I have interest there, but mainly for me, it's just Bo Melton. And like I said, with Cruikshank now out for the season, Shameen Jones at 3.1 actually holds a lot more appeal the last 3 weeks prior to week 10, looks like he had over 15 catches. So he's starting to get more involved at 3-1. If you get a guy again putting up that kind of that Rutgers special, which is like a 550, no touchdowns, that's fine at 3-1. So I'm looking at this game for some mid-range guys that I think will work out just fine. More news we'll have to monitor though.
So yeah, one thing I thought was interesting with this one was, Carr would have been an interesting play. He's at 5'3". That's pretty cheap for a running back that can do some damage. He's hurt. We don't know that we're necessarily going to get Carr, and we know that we're probably not going to get a real good quarterback, whoever it is, or if we are, they're coming off of injury and maybe not at the top of their game. The next man up for Indiana is Childers at 4-5. And I don't really know a lot about Childers, to be honest with you. I know a decent amount about Carr. I don't know a whole lot about Childers, but he's a running back that might get a pretty decent workload at 4-5 against Rutgers with a team that's probably going to shy away from the passing game.
Yeah. That's a good call. And they're giving up. Rutgers is giving up 164 on the ground too. So
I'm a little bit interested if Carr can't go. A high volume running back that might have the chance to be efficient at 4-5. That's looking for value. That's one of them that you don't want to overlook completely.
Yeah, definitely. I only know about him from earlier is that he was an Indiana State running back. So he came over to the Hoosiers to pursue his dreams of making the NFL. But yeah, it's a good call at 4-5. I mean, the matchup's good. So again, there's a lot of news for this game in particular, and I don't think people are really going to be hyping it much. It's definitely not going to be popping on projections, I don't think. So it's a good spot to look for that sneaky value. I know we both pride ourselves, especially you, and you do a great job of finding these kind of sneakier plays that, what maybe the snaps are up, but not the receptions, or there's some sort of situation that's changing that's not obvious, very subtle. And I know you pride yourself on that. So a play like Childers could really go under the radar potentially, depending on how this news breaks. So
it's one of those things. And I'll use Plumlee as an example, just because I am a JRP guy.
Yeah.
It was announced that he was one of the 3 starting receivers, but then the entire industry was on him because it's the Ole Miss game and there's going to be a ton of points. This is the opposite of that. Nobody cares about the backup Indiana running back, right? But he's still a running back at 4-5, and if he sees a ton of volume, he doesn't have to be particularly great to get there. And if he falls into the end zone a couple times, you're looking at a pretty good point per dollar play. So
yeah, he got his first touchdown last week on 11 carries. So definitely some interest here for this game. All right, next one, Michigan versus Penn State. This should be a real one. I don't want to say it's one of those better. It's cliche to say better real life games in fantasy because there's fantasy options here, but this one just feels like it has war written all over it. Michigan -1, interesting enough, 48.5 over under is what I'm showing on DK. Tell us about this one, Jake.
Well, it almost seems like you're reading my notes because the first sentence I wrote about this was, this one has all the makings of a classic Big Ten slugfest that ends up like 13-6. And I think we're on the same page about that. So the first thing I'll say is Corum has that injury. Donovan Edwards probably is also going to be injured, which is going to lead a lot of people to Hassan Haskins. But you still have to pay up for Hassan Haskins at 7,500. It's, that's a lot to pay for what I think will end up being a very rough and tumble, messy, classic Big Ten game. And I don't think he's going to have the efficiency that you need from a running back that you have to pay that much for. I think he probably will be popular, and I think it probably is going to be a mistake. So I don't do a ton of flag plants. There will be only one other one on this show, but my first flag plant is going to be Hassan Haskins will be popular and also bad. as a play.
Love it.
So that's the stand that I'm taking. That said, I also don't particularly like the Michigan passing game. I did like the explosiveness out of Anthony. I was all hyped about using him the following week on the night slate, and then he got hurt, a couple series in and didn't really have much of a game. I just don't think that they have a whole lot of explosive options in the passing game, and I don't like the game environment. Then on the Penn State side, well, we saw what Dotson could do last week, didn't we? Dotson's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Dotson is also the most expensive receiver on the slate now, and he's going up against the Michigan defense. The most expensive receiver on the slate shouldn't be going up against the Michigan defense. That's the wrong time to pay up for a receiver. It's the wrong matchup. I don't really like anyone else. I mean, if Clifford was I'm not even going to try to justify a case for Clifford. I'm not interested in Clifford. I'm not interested in the running game. If you have the salary to pay for Dotson, you should spend it on Deuce Vaughn instead. I'm pretty much out on everybody in this game. I don't think this game will provide a lot of fantasy points, real life points, any kind of points. I think we can probably just easily move on to the next game.
Yeah, I agree. There's Dotson we were big on him last week. I screwed around. There was that news, JSN for Ohio State. I went to him. I came off of Dotson. Obviously, it was very upsetting. David Bell and JSN really came through for me, so it's not too upsetting, but it's still hurt to be hyping up a guy all week and then come off of him at the end because of news. But like I said, it was less. The blow was lessened because the guys I swapped to were good as well. But yeah, this is the time to jump off. And I'm not really a big fan of paying this $9K price for receivers. I know people look at me sideways when I was saying I don't want to pay the Josh Downs price of $9K, even though I get his target share is amazing. I kind of lucked out because teams are starting to triple team him now. But yeah, if I'm going to pay that price, I just almost want to pay the receiver or just go to the quarterback. So I'm with you on that spot, unless it's a really, really good matchup. But yeah, I'm off of Dotson too. Next game, Northwestern versus Wisconsin. Minus 24 for Wisconsin seems excessive, honestly, but Northwestern is quite bad, I guess. And a 41 over under. So the big news here, and you guys should know this by now, if you've been paying attention, and I know, if you're watching the show, you probably do, but the Northwestern rushing defense is very bad. It's a matchup that we've been able to target against a lot with very good success. They're giving up currently 226.2 yards per game on the ground. So what that means is the Wisconsin ground game is going to be huge. We used Goodson last week on one of those ancillary slates. He went off. There's a bit of news here with Wisconsin. Ches Malusi is out for the season now, I believe. So that's going to take his carries and funnel a whole lot of those into Braylon Allen. And the last maybe 2-3 weeks, I've been saying in the Discord, no one really pays attention because no one really pays attention to Wisconsin or they hadn't been on the slate. But I said, man, this Braylon Allen kid is the truth. And I've been saying it once a week just to kind of put it out there for people. And now we finally get an opportunity to use him. And he's been doing so good that his price is up and everybody's probably going to use him. So this is one of those popular plays that I alluded to earlier in the show where I'm pretty locked into him. When I get in a matchup that I believe in, when you're going to be talking about Michigan State, it's just there's these matchups that I believe in that I'm just going to take the guy, and I don't care what his ownership is, and unless his price is like the 9.5, 10K, and it's just really hard to justify it, I'm just going to roll him. And Allen at 8.2 for me is not priced out in this particular matchup for a guy who's probably going to get 20 carries. Since getting volume back in week 6, he's been over 100 rushing yards. He has multiple touchdowns in several games, but he has 6 on the season. He has 666 yards and 7.1 YPC. So a very effective back that's going to do some damage here. Wisconsin's passing game can do some damage against this Northwestern defense because they do give it up through the air as well, but they really rely on the running game. So Allen is definitely a guy that I really, really am going to be all over. And then there's some GPP talk or just value talk in general about some of these other guys. Julius Davis is one that several Wisconsin friends. Interesting enough, a lot of people that I talk to on a daily basis are big Wisconsin fans, and Davis is a name that they've told me to pay attention to for the foreseeable future. So he is only priced at $3K. It makes sense for maybe him to step up and get some additional carries. Would he jump into a 10 to 15 carry role like Allen had behind Malusi? Maybe not, but it's worth a shot in GPPs. It's maybe even worth a shot in your main if we read into it more. Wisconsin's going to run the ball so much, but yeah, Allen is the easy play for me this week, regardless of his ownership. As far as wide receivers go for Wisconsin, I have used a wide receiver from their team once this year. It was on a short slate, and it was under the beginning of the year when I was trying to make Shamiri DK a thing, and it just didn't work out. So I'm not looking at them. We're obviously not playing Graham Mertz, even though he has started throw touchdowns and looking a little better. He's priced. If he was like 4 or 5, I still probably wouldn't consider him. Definitely not at 6'2". And then as far as Northwestern goes, this is a really bad matchup for them. Evan Hull has been their most fantasy relevant player. He's had a couple games over 20 fantasy points. He's receiving, involved in the receiving game a lot. You see the last couple of games, he's been over 3 receptions, couple touchdowns. But this is just a horrible matchup. He's facing one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, and it's just not going to be very good for them. Points wise, Wisconsin's going to be happy to just control the clock, punch it in when they need to, go up like 14-3 or whatever. And then, that might be it. So there are some interesting guys like, Stephen Robinson and things of that nature, if it was a better matchup, but it's really just not. So it's the running game for me when I say I'm going to be on this chalk play. So are you going to be also following along with the Braylon Allen play, or is that a spot where you kind of feel like he's just the flavor of the week and you want to look for leverage elsewhere?
Yeah. So for cash, I don't mind the way you're thinking about Braylon Allen at all. I think that's the smart play and probably the way that I would lean as well.
Okay.
I would be a little bit hesitant about his ceiling for GPP. And I'm curious what you think a ceiling game for him in a slow molasses-paced Wisconsin offense would look like in a game where they're not going to have to put up a ton of points. I'm curious what that would look like. I mean, maybe it's like 30 DK points, right? That's probably you would be happy with a 30 DK point game from him. And so for cash, 100%, lock me in. I love it. For GPP, I'm probably looking to do a little bit better than that from a point per dollar perspective. So it just depends on what your game selection looks like, and also what your roster construction looks like. But I completely get the play. I am a little bit hesitant to see the ceiling that I would want for that price at one of my precious running back slots.
Oh, and that's a fair point, because, I mean, even with Goodson, it'd probably be something like this, right? So Goodson had 21 carries last week, 141 yards. He did break a bigger one and a touchdown. So we're probably looking at somewhere between 20 to 22 carries if he can really bust a big one. So somewhere between 125 to 135 yards and a touchdown. So at the 8.2 price, yeah, you're right. That might not be enough to win you the GPP. I was really hoping he would come into it cheaper when we got to use him, but he's just been smashing.
Yeah, that's peaky. Like if you were at like the Abram Smith range, I'd be like, I'm all over it. Let's do it. But it's 82 gives me a little bit of pause, especially in GPP where you do need to really rock that high point per dollar.
Yeah. So with those larger field tournaments, I definitely would be from a game theory standpoint on board with you there. I like to play game selection wise some of the higher dollar stuff or the lower field stuff. Just because there's a little less variance. So yeah, it definitely comes down to game selection, like you said. So that's important to realize, because sometimes when we're doing these write-ups or do shows or even talking in Discord, we'll say we like a play. You were really high. There was a kid from Buffalo, which was in your process was really good on it. And people were like, oh shoot, it sounded so good. They want to play him in cash. And you're like, well, pump the brakes. This is more of a GBP play. You just noted your reasoning behind it was so compelling. I mean, shoot, I almost was going to play him. So you did a good job with that. So differentiating the two is really important. So we appreciate that. Next game on the slate here is Georgia versus Tennessee. minus 20 Georgia, a high over under for a Georgia game, 56.
It was. I noticed that.
The Vols games have been so fantasy friendly. Like every time Tennessee's usually on like those later slates or whatever, and we're always playing Hooker, and he's always going ham. It's tough because I have a really strict rule for myself that I don't take players against Georgia. But in the Georgia side, it's tough to take players for them because they're so balanced and they just spread it out because they're just toying with people. So it's tough to get behind this game, but that total really was eye-opening to me. So maybe we need to consider it more. What do you think?
I think that you read my notes again. I started out by saying with Georgia games, you don't want to focus on either side, but with Tennessee games, you want both sides.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we're in sync there, we're in lockstep. That Hooker price, which is a weird sentence, I'm going to phrase that differently. The DraftKings, the DraftKings salary for Hendon Hooker is tempting.
It's tasty, definitely.
I'm going back to the Letty Brown thing of like, damn, this is the lowest we've seen him all year. That said, it's the Georgia defense. That's, if anybody is going to warrant Florida pricing, it's the Georgia defense, right? But Vegas seems to think that the Tennessee is going to score some points. And if they're going to score some points, I don't think it's going to be Jabari Small just gashing him for like 7 yards of carry. I think it's going to be Hooker involved in that by land or by air, right? And so with a defense like that, I don't know if they're particularly susceptible to a mobile quarterback or if Tennessee is going to try to run Hooker a little bit more. I'm pretty interested in Hendon Hooker at that 6,500, and so if you're going to do that, it's also a little bit enticing to maybe involve a pass catcher, and stacking a quarterback wide receiver duo against Georgia. It's not for the faint of heart, right? Like that is the definition of a GPP move. But if it works out, you're probably the only one doing that too. So the good news for you if you do that is the Tennessee receivers are relatively cheap. Tillman, I don't love Tillman at that 5,400 price. I think Jones at 4,600 and Peyton at 39 are probably more intriguing if you're going to get crazy and do that QB wide receiver Tennessee stack. I'm trying to talk myself into it because I really do want to apply the GPP mentality and think that everyone thought that Kentucky had this great defense and then Tennessee tore them up and if you stack that game, you were looking pretty good. And so I'm not saying that Georgia is not a better defense than Kentucky. They probably are. I'm almost certain they are. But Tennessee's been able to hold their own, and they give up a ton of points too. And so they're going to have to play, keep the foot on the gas as much as possible. And you want your offense to be doing that. You don't want them to be stalling and not running efficiently. On the Georgia side, can we make Zeus an actual running back? Can we get Zeus like 20 to 25 touches a game, please, once? He has so much talent. He has an amazing offensive line. He's playing Tennessee. This is what we want to see from a running back is volume and efficiency. And he's not priced up to the point where I wouldn't want to play him. He's at 6,800, but I don't think he's going to get the touches to get there, which is the exact same way I feel about everyone else on the Georgia offense. They would be a great play if I knew that they were going to get enough snaps to be a great play. I understand that's a confusing way to say something, but but that's kind of how I feel about it. Is everybody individually on Georgia has the talent if given the opportunity, and they just haven't been given the opportunity. So if I'm on anyone from Georgia, it's probably going to be Zeus on just a hope and a prayer in that same game stack where I'm stacking, hooker and a wide receiver, that they decide to give him 25 to 30 touches. That said, pretty low probability thing. I don't think it's going to happen right now. They're probably saving him for the conference championship or the CFP or whatever, and they want to keep the body fresh. But if I'm going to anyone on the Georgia side, that's probably where I'm going.
Yeah, and Georgia's really strict with his touches, because I ended up getting away from him against Missouri. It was tough because we know the Missouri matchup is great, and thankfully it worked because he only had 9 carries. He did score, but he just had the 9 carries, and they were very strict. Once the game got out of hand, he was done. Right. At least Tennessee has the offense to keep up. But I will say Georgia's faced off against a couple of mobile, QBs. KJ Jefferson for the Arkansas, they held them to 0. He threw for under 100, rushed for under 100. And then that Florida game, they held them to 7. And Emery and Richardson both got held in check pretty tough. Yeah, so it's very scary.
Georgia's built different. That said, we didn't necessarily see that game coming 100% from Hendon Hooker. You might have, but certainly the industry, I don't think saw it coming that way, and it will be low owned.
Yeah,
is the best thing that I can say about it.
Yeah, he's the real deal, man. We had noticed something in that Kentucky game. We had been talking about in the Discord. We just noticed their defense was looking a bit lackadaisical, and they were ripe for getting beaten. Yeah, we had some good. Luckily, Tillman, who I had in that game, caught a touchdown later. But yeah, that was a great game. So if anyone could potentially put a dent in this Georgia defense, it would probably be the Vols with their impactful offense. So yeah, it's a GPP special for sure. I like it. As far as Georgia goes, man. I really like, not kind of, but I do really like Brock Bowers, and he's under 6K now. I kind of like him for GPP too. Every time I think it's a Bowers game, then Lad McConkey kind of jumps out and randomly goes off. So it's a very, very difficult game to trust from any perspective. But
that's the thing.
That total just tells me there's something going to happen here that we're going to regret not using or using. That's just how I feel about that.
I would love to know, where to shove all of my chips and go in on a particular Georgia player, but I think it's more like putting all my chips on the roulette table, right? So you never know which one's going to pop up and have the big week. It's kind of like the Oklahoma wide receivers, and it's just there will be points. It's not the spot for me to try to pick out where they're going to come from.
So the next game on the docket is a good spot to target, and I think we'll see some popularity between Miami and Florida State. Close spread, -3 for Miami, 61 over/under. I could see it going over that as well. Kind of popular, I feel will be popular and should. Number 2, which play and chalk I'm going to eat, is on the Miami side, and I was a little late to the party on him, and he's expensive, but Jalen Knighton at 7-9. He's going to have a feast. He had 32 carries against Georgia Tech last week. That's just or a couple weeks ago, whatever. And he's had 20 plus DK points in 4 straight since really, all the injuries to their other backs and taking it over. And he's very active in the passing game. I know he's had no receptions last week, but when you're carrying the rock 32 times, you don't really care about passes. So he's just got a very, very heavy volume, and now facing off against that Florida State defense that, has been really fantasy friendly this year. They're giving up, just under 30 points, about 155 on the ground. And we've seen guys do some serious damage against them. And again, we're not getting him at a cheap price because he's been tearing it up. But I do see Knighton and Allen being 2 of the more popular backs. And for this is probably gonna be the same conversation that you maybe say, but for cash game, single entry, whatever, he's just a rock solid play that I think you want to roll with. Now in GPP, I think his upside is definitely better than Allen though, because he was receiving. So I think you can still play him in GPP. He's my favorite play over Allen as my RB1. He's the guy that I'm going to be on the most, but again, he's going to be pretty chalky, I believe. So that's the play that I'm going to run as my RB1 with Allen as RB2. And then it's crazy to see Van Dyke, who's been really good, up to the 8K range. I'm certainly not recommending playing him, but he does have 30 plus fantasy points on DK 3 straight. And he's playing that Florida State defense that, like I said, has been beatable. So he might be worth a GPP share there because he's not slowing down. And then as far as receivers go from Miami, man, Charleston Rambo has really stepped up. There was a couple of games early season where it was like, oh man, it's like he's still in, a Sooner. But no, he's really taken over. 83 targets, 9 games, 58 catches, 853 yards, 5 touchdowns. Next closest in targets is Mike Harley with 51. And then Keyshawn Smith, our guy that we used a couple weeks ago, with 47. So Rambo's price is astronomically high for me at 8K. But he's definitely doing some damage. He has over 400 receiving yards in his last 3. 2 of those games were 30 plus fantasy points. He should also do some big damage here. And they've priced up everybody, that we would use, like Keyshawn Smith, who was cheap. He's 5'1". Restrepo, he had a nice game a couple weeks ago. He's only 3.3. It's really for me Knighton as my serious play. And then on the other side for FSU, their passing game, between Travis and Milton hasn't been great, which has really affected the receivers. If you look at the targets, you have Andrew Parchment, who came over from Kansas as kind of a stud, 31 total targets as the team leader. And then you have Keyshawn Helton, who people have been talking about for 2.5, 3 years about stepping up. Hasn't happened, 29 targets. And then Cam McDonald with 25. So the receivers aren't really usable. They're cheap. I would love to use them. This is a great spot to use them. I keep wanting Parchment to be a thing because I know Parchment has the ability to smash out. It's just the quarterback play has been so poor that it hasn't helped him. And they throw a lot to the receiver or the running backs because they just don't seem to have the deep ball in them. Milton, coming off of that type of injury, and Travis is a runner. I did see something interesting that said the running back share is going to be much more, Treshaun Corbin's been getting a lot of the work lately. But they're talking about Treshaun Ward now getting more snaps / potentially even being a co-starter. So I don't know if that's any truth to that or it's coach speak, but Treshaun Ward has been really good. You look back, before the Clemson game, he was in double-digit fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. Actually, I'm sorry, 5 of his last 6. And then before that against Wake, 17, 16, So he's been doing a lot with the little carries that he has. His YPC is actually pretty strong at almost 7. Has 3 touchdowns, involved in the receiving game with 16 catches. So if I can get some further, I'm kind of the snoop around the message boards. It's harder for me to do that now that CBB season has started because I don't have the time that I had before to dig in like that. But it is a situation I think is worth checking out because at 3.8, if Ward's going to be, without the straight designate co-starter, but he's going to get 10 plus carries or 15 touches at 3.8 against Miami, hell yeah, I want shares of him. That price is just way too cheap for a guy that would get that kind of work. Toafili has been hurt a lot, which has caused, Corbin to get so much work. At 7K, I probably wouldn't be using him, but yeah, I really do like Ward quite a bit. So maybe that's my sneaky play. Whereas, we have the Wisconsin backup running back at 3K to potentially use. You have the Indiana backup turn starter that's, potentially used. So there is some value at the running back spot that you could use as your RB3 and probably feel pretty good about it. We do have some news that we need to get through, though, that we don't have at our hands right now, which is why you want to be in that CFB DFS Discord on Saturday mornings, because we are dropping that news as it happens. So that's a big thing. And CBB tonight, there was a late scratch. Approximately like 15 minutes before the game, there was a non-COVID illness for a Vermont player. He was 35% owned, but our Discord members did not use him because we had that info available to them. So the Discord alone is worth the sub. So just make sure you guys are around for that. So Miami FSU, good game. Just kind of went through it. You have some people here you like too. I mean, once you're a night and hearing me say that, and I'm sure you knew that, you probably figured it out on your own, you're a smart guy, that he's going to be popular, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So
that you're
also looking to have leverage off of, or would you just use him?
This does seem like a pretty stackable game. It seems like there's going to be a good offensive flow. Yeah. And both teams should be able to move the ball, which is what you want to see if you're going to stack a game, right? And so I think because of that, because you're going to see both teams probably have success, I'd be a little bit more likely to trend towards using Knighton and be thinking that he might be able to get that upside that Braylon Allen might not get to, because I think that both teams are going to be involved heavily into this game, right? So that said, if he gets chalky enough, I'm probably not interested for GPP. Not because I don't think the ceiling's there, but because I think that there's a an ownership issue, right? So I know you have your conviction plays and you want to play him regardless of ownership and all that. He could be that guy. I have a guy like that too, where I will in my second flag plant, which is coming up in a little bit. I will play him regardless of what anyone else thinks of him, because I think he's going to have that good of a game. And if you feel that way about Knighton, I get it. And I like this game environment quite a bit. Ward at 3.8 is like the sexy improved version of Childers. Nobody wants to talk about the Indiana running back because it's the Indiana running back. We're talking about a much better game environment, and if the snap share and the volume is there for him, this could be a great place to absolutely smash that 3.8 tag. And I would be probably more inclined to do that if I'm stacking this game for GPP.
Yeah, no, those are all fair points, definitely. I got maybe a feeling about who this stash play is, but maybe not, because you come up with some good ones. So let's move on to the next game then. Iowa State versus Texas Tech. Minus 10.5 for Iowa State. 58.5 over under. We know Texas Tech's defense is rough. We know Breece Hall is the man going to get the volume, but it's always that, do I want to pay the price tag for Breece Hall? And he's up there around 9.5, which is pretty typical for him. So give us the rundown on the Iowa State game.
Yeah, so I love Breece Hall. I would like to get to Breece Hall. I feel similarly about Hall as I do to Deuce Vaughn. He's quality, and you're paying for quality. You're shopping at the high end boutique, and you're paying the price for it, right? He's incredibly consistent. He scores touchdowns. The only week he didn't score a touchdown is when they had a bye. And so, yeah, you're going to get production from Breece Hall. And I think this is a pretty good matchup for him. So I can't say anything negative about him other than the price is maybe not what you want for getting the highest point per dollar for GPP. Brock Purdy, come on, Brock Purdy. I want you to do great things. You're always in that mid 6 range where you want to see a quarterback that has, some running tendencies and could fall into the end zone a time or two and just make that great fantasy day. Yeah, it could be Brock Purdy's week. I hope. I've been playing him for weeks now. It's gotta happen at some point. I'm not overly convicted that it's going to be Brock Purdy week this week. I think they just pound Breece 30 times and Iowa State's going to do what they do. Because I feel that way, I'm also not particularly interested in paying 7.4 for Hutchinson. There's some good receiver value on this slate. There's a dude at Purdue that is cheaper than this that I think is going to have a better game. I think what I'm talking about. Hutchinson's been a stud and been pretty consistent, but I don't think this is the spot for him either. If I'm not going to Kohler. I like the nostalgia as much as everyone else with Kohler, and seeing him in the mid 4 range, it's nice. But I also don't think this is a particularly high volume game for him. There's not the need for it. They're gonna pound Breece and drain some clock. Why? I don't know why this is only, what is this, a 10.5 point spread? I think this could be a 20 point spread. I don't know what Texas Tech is going to do to get first downs, let alone touchdowns.
Yeah.
So I don't see this as a high volume game for the passing game. So if I'm playing anyone, I'm playing Breece, and if I'm playing Breece, I'm probably doing it in cash is my analysis. On the Texas Tech side, no. Probably just no. If you want to get crazy, the guy with the long last name, Ekudzama, maybe. I don't see it. It's not the spot. Iowa State's defense is legit. They shut down Texas. Texas Tech is not going to do well against this defense. Don't play people from Texas Tech. If you're going to play anyone, probably play Brees and do it in cash, and that's probably as far as we need to go.
Yeah. Tech is Columbia's horrible. So, but it does sound like Tyler Shough is going to play. He's practicing. He's an option. So he's not a guy. I hated him at Oregon. I'm a Husky fan. But I don't know if Vegas thinks that they'll keep it close because of him. I certainly don't. But yeah, Texas Tech is I'm kind of done. I got cute with Columbia one week, didn't work. I tried to play Geiger, didn't work. So Roderick Thompson is really the only guy that you can get value out of and price. But
I thought about that for the second, and if it were still Columbia and we were going to check down like 15 times a game, then I would have a little bit more interest in Roderick, and I like playing him. He is one of my guys, especially at this price point. But no, I can't play guys against Iowa State, especially not Texas Tech guys. It's I don't want any part of that side.
Yeah, I agree. It's too cute. All right, so Minnesota versus Iowa. We had some other options or some games they left off that we really could have used, but we have it -4.5 for Iowa, 37.5 over under. Very difficult to get excited about either of these teams' passing games. You're looking at, guys leading the team on Minnesota with 34 targets between Daniel Jackson and Chris Ottman-Bell. And on the Iowa side, it's really not too sexy. These are two teams that really do like to run the ball. We're looking at targets. I guess Sam Laporta has 52 targets now. So Mr. Laporta is getting heavily targeted. I used him earlier this year, but it's really, I guess, the running game that's going to get volume, but neither of these teams seed a whole lot. I will say it seems that Kai Thomas, we did that last week with the chalk. He's now 6,900. We don't have to worry about playing him this week, thankfully. But it does seem that he is starting to assume that role over Irving, which is a very bad luck role because everyone who takes it gets hurt.
Right.
So it is his backfield. So if you are one of those people who runs, the 150 or whatever, I definitely think, throwing some exposure out there is probably kind of a wise idea just in case he falls in a couple times, but his price is so high. It's really tough. I would rather probably look at someone like Ottman-Bell, who is only 4-1 and he's probable to play. Reports expected to play. He hasn't done a whole lot the last couple of games, but you saw when things were clicking against Nebraska, he had 11 for 103. He is really the WR1. So that's an interesting price for him. I think they will end up having to throw the ball. Whether they'll be successful at it is another thing entirely. And then Goodson, who we used recently, 7-3. So you have all these running backs, DKs. They've got all this data, so they're wedging all these guys, if they're relevant at all, into that kind of 6.9 to 7.5 range, and then you have your super studs over 8K. So Goodson's a guy. He's another one of those ones who I think is fine as a play because he's going to have the volume, but he's really not anyone that I would be interested in playing with any seriousness. However, despite it being a low total, if they score, it's probably going to be on his, the back of his shoulders. So he could easily get 2 touchdowns here. Will he have a lot of yardage? It's tough to say. We did just see Illinois running backs kind of actually their whole offense kind of hurt Minnesota recently. So there's potential here, but there's just too much going on. It's a large slate, 13 games. If it was like one of those Friday night, 3 or 4 gamers, I think I'd really be kind of getting into the nitty gritty with you and explaining the nuances of why we need to play Sam Laporta. Thankfully, nobody wants to hear that. I don't want to talk about it, and we have too big of a slate to really talk about it. So there's nobody here for me to really play seriously. The only play that I would be interested in is priced out, thankfully, and he already let us down last week. No fault of his own. His touchdown got called back with Kai Thomas. So if it's cool with you, we'll move on to the sexy Ohio State game, unless you've got some sneakiness here in the Iowa.
No, I'm generally uninterested in Iowa games, other than playing Goodson when price and matchup dictates, and this game is no exception.
Gotcha. Purdue and Ohio State. Then we have over under 63 and -121.
So this is the one that I couldn't wait to talk about. JSN had an amazing game last week, and his price is now through the roof. I think Wilson's back. Do we know if Wilson's going to be back?
He went through a practice just recently. I read on Twitter earlier, so should be playing.
I think Wilson's going to play.
Yeah.
Olave is obviously going to play, and none of it's going to matter because this is the Travion Henderson game. And there have been Travion Henderson games. He put up like 50 against Tulsa or something. Travion Henderson is going to have 200 rushing yards and 50 receiving yards and 4 or more touchdowns. This is my other flag plant. This is the game that we wanted last week from Travion Henderson. He is going to go absolutely bonkers. The way that you feel about Braylon Allen, multiply that by explosiveness and an offense that likes to score points and has an opponent that can score points. And that's how I feel about Travion Henderson. This is as strongly as I've felt probably all season about a play, and I will have him in virtually every lineup. I'm very much a Travion Henderson fan this week, and maybe it's dangerous to put all your chips in like that, but I tend to have a GPP mindset, and so when I feel convicted about something, that's the thing that I'm going to do. If you want to play some receivers, play some receivers. If you want to play CJ Stroud, don't play CJ Stroud. He's incredibly expensive. He doesn't run the ball. He throws it to 3 receivers. Play one of those receivers, and save like $3K on a quarterback, or $4K, which is what we'll get to in a second. If I had to pick a receiver, it's probably going to be Olave. JSN is going to get more attention from the secondary than he has previously. Wilson coming off of injury. Olave is the squeaky wheel. I think if I'm going to lean a receiver on Ohio State, it's probably going to be Olave, but I'm not going to do that because I'm just going to play Henderson from this team. They're going to run the offense through him. I feel very confident about that. And we saw that pretty much every week we saw that you can smash as a running back against Purdue. On the Purdue side, they had an amazing game. You were 100% on top of our AOC quarterback, and pairing him with kind of whoever you want, but also David Bell.
Yeah,
and David Bell at 6'7". That's why you don't play Olave, because David Bell is 6'7". And if you're looking at a receiver in that range, that is who you should be looking at, because what did he end up with? Like 16 targets or something like that?
Yeah.
I had 16 targets, caught 11 of them, and went for 217 and a touchdown, and probably could have done more. Right. And for 6'7", that's also why you don't pay $8,800 for Dotson against Michigan, because the stats are available to you for much less in a much better game environment. Ohio State doesn't have a good defense. I don't know why people think that they do. They do against really bad teams. Mm-hmm. They do when Tulsa is completely overmatched. They do when Rutgers is completely overmatched, but we saw what Purdue can do against a bad secondary, and Ohio State has a bad secondary. This is probably the game that I'm most interested in stacking, and I have Henderson on the Ohio State side, and then O'Connell and Bell and Anthrop and whoever else you want to throw in as a auxiliary receiver around Bell on the Purdue side. I can't get enough of this game. This game's going to be amazing from a DFS perspective, probably also from a real life perspective. It's going to be a fun game to watch. 2 high-powered offenses and not a whole lot of defense. Very much the antithesis of the Penn State-Michigan game in terms of style of play.
Absolutely. And looking back at some of the, similar, like you said, Dotson, 11 catches, 127 against them. You go back to earlier this year where Tulsa was pushing them and they let Davis Brin, of all people, throw for over 400 yards. Josh Johnson, who kind of profiles similar as his pass catcher, 8 catches, 149 and a touchdown. So you're looking at a big day for David Bell. His price is an absolute joke. And this is like one of those textbook, we get the NFL guys that come in on Saturdays and talk to us because they're building lineups or whatever. And they're very, very like, I got to stack and I got to run it back. And we're kind of like, oh, whatever, I guess. Well, this is going to be perfect for them because, your Henderson play, who's great, he's going to run the ball a lot. And then easily with Aiden O'Connell, who's only 5'4", going against Ohio State team that, yes, getting beat by a real good pass catch.
Did O'Connell's price go down from last week?
It might have. What was it last week? Let's see.
It
went down 200.
Yeah. How do you have the game that he had and have the price go? I don't know. Whatever. Thank you, DraftKings. I will play O'Connell this weekend.
Yeah, and this would be, and I'm really the church. We joke the church of 4 running backs, the house of 4 running backs, because we're really a big proponent of that. But this would be a week where I would maybe not, because there's a quarterback in this last game we're going to talk about.
Yeah, there's another cheap quarterback that's going up against that same defense that O'Connell played last weekend. It's pretty enticing at his price point too. So we'll get there.
So you could wrap 2 quarterbacks up for under 12K and it's just seems like a slam dunk. So yeah, I love O'Connell. Bell's easy. I ran the 3. I chose Milton Wright to go with him. He did okay. He had a couple more targets, could have done better, 453. The interesting thing about Jackson Anthrop is they're running him a lot more. Like he's carrying the ball because their running game has been kind of banged up / not efficient. I will say Ohio State's defense has been a little better against the run.
Don't play Kangaroo in this game.
Yeah. But Jackson, he's got 10 carries the last 2. So he's getting a lot of touches, 12 catches. He's only 4.2. So then they're getting him involved a lot. They really like what he can do. So I don't mind if you were to triple stack this in like a game stack setting. Anthrop is probably the guy. We'll have to see about Payne Durham because he was out last week, which affected the target share, of course. If Durham were to play, he's kind of interesting at 3.82. But yeah, there's a lot to like in this game. And I don't have any issues running, Henderson. I did it last week with JSN because I was trying to eat all that. And I would probably – I usually just play the cheapest of the 3 Ohio State wide receivers, but I think I would be inclined to just, follow your lead there and play Henderson if I can fit him because they're definitely going to feed him. He doesn't belong in college. They're going to make him play in college, but he's to me, he seems like an NFL back now. He's a man amongst boys out there. So a great play, great game stack. Like I said, the NFL guys that hang out with us on Saturdays are going to love stacking this game every which way they can. With the run back.
Can we talk about this point spread for a minute? Like I don't know that they watched the Michigan State game. Like why is this? Or I don't think they watched Ohio State's defense play anyone that's good.
It seems high.
How is this a 3-score game to anyone that's been watching?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at putting the Purdue point spread on a few things because that seems way too high. 100% agree. And even the total might be a little low, 63. I know it's hard to bet anything over 60, but shoot, I mean,
yeah, no, that's a good point too because like if it stays a more competitive game, you're going to expect Ohio State to keep the foot on the gas. It doesn't matter because if you just hand off to Travion, he's going to score if you want him to burn clock or if you want him to score anyway. But Purdue plus what was it like 20.5 and the over are interesting plays for people whom gambling is legal.
Definitely. So we like that game, and then we like with the de facto, we'll call it the late hammer. It's the last game. It's during the day. Maryland versus Michigan State, and I think this one has this is a betting opportunity we'll talk about here because it's my DK at least might be different in the book you're looking at, but -12 on DK. I think Michigan State could potentially hammer that out. And it's a 60.5 over under. So there's a lot to like here. You mentioned this matchup for the quarterback on the other side. Cheap quarterbacks against Michigan State has been a thing. People are kind of slow going to it. I was kicking myself 2 weeks ago because I didn't play McNamara. I wasn't going to make that mistake last week with O'Connell. Probably not going to make that mistake this week by fading this guy. So what are we doing with this Maryland Michigan State game?
So we're my thoughts on Baby Tua Taulia Tagovailoa. You don't want to play him against good defenses. The first defense the first defense of any kind that he faced was Iowa, and I don't know if you were paying close attention to that game. It was on a Friday night. It was kind of an afterthought of a game, but he was absolutely terrible.
And he was super chalky too.
He was super chalky because he hadn't faced anything in terms of a real defense yet. And so plenty of time to read the field, no pressure. And I think he still had Demas at that point too. So like there were more options in the passing game, couldn't lock in to Ricky Jarrett. But he got absolutely smacked and turnovers galore. I forget what the final score was, but it was gross.
5 interceptions was really bad. Really bad.
Michigan State is not that defense, right? And we saw what Purdue did there. So yes, we're playing him. We're playing him, and we're playing O'Connell. And sorry to the church, we'll go to confessional. We'll make up for it at some point. But we're gonna play 2 quarterbacks, and those are gonna be them, or at least I am. I don't know exactly who I want to, because if I'm playing them, I probably want to pair them with some pass catchers. They're pretty cheap, right? So, the volume kind of seemed to go towards the tight end. That's what I saw, and then you've got Ricky Jarrett, who's kind of more the explosive guy, and he's 4,500. He's a little bit more expensive, but not expensive by any means. And then you've got Fleming, who's not the Ohio State Fleming. I think we had some.
He's been, he's been reliable though. If you look at his logs, he's been pretty reliable.
Yeah. So there's, if you have some other guys to expand in that depth chart that are of interest as pass catchers for Maryland, certainly mention them. But those are the 3 guys that came to mind for me in terms of who to pair Taulia Tagovailoa with. And then on the other side, I mean, it's Walker. I don't feel the same way about anyone as I do Travion Henderson, but if there's someone who's close, it's Walker going up against a Maryland defense that is going to allow him to do whatever he wants to do. And I think in my, I always do like kind of a preliminary build of, what is the lineup that makes the most sense to me before I think about anything else. And that preliminary lineup to me was stacking the Ohio State game and the Maryland Michigan State game, and then penciling in one other player that was cheap somewhere else. That was what made the most sense to me from a fantasy goodness perspective, and obviously that can all change once you consider injury news and ownership and all that. But these last 2 games here these are pretty amazing spots.
Yeah. So with Kenny Walker still trying to get that Heisman, still being in the mix. Maryland, we know their rush defense. It doesn't on paper. If you just look at like flat stats, it's like 146. It's not horrible, but when they face running backs of this caliber, they've gotten actually shredded. So, Henderson, 100 plus 2 touchdowns. Kai Thomas, 100 plus and a touchdown. Carr, who you mentioned before, that Indiana game was 38-35. He rushed, I believe it was like close to 160, like 150, somewhere in there, 2 touchdowns. So with the way Walker runs, he should be just doing some serious damage. So it's definitely a situation where if you were to run like 4 running backs instead, I think, Walker would have to be in consideration. It's very expensive at almost $9K. You're going to be it's going to be hard pressed to do so, but I think it's definitely doable. And then as you mentioned, the Maryland wideouts, I'll just go through target share real quick. Raheem Jarrett, 56. Now the tight end is probably the most interesting. This is my best crack at his first name, but his last name is Okonkwo. Chikozemi.
Yeah, I wasn't going to try to pronounce that one.
I think I got it. I think I nailed it with the Chikozemi. I think it's close. With 40 targets, and then you have Fleet Davis in there, but Marcus Fleming with 25. And then Carlos Carrier, who has 23, he kind of popped out. He's not very consistent. He had that game against Indiana, 8 catches, 134 and 2 touchdowns. Some people were like, oh, who's this guy? And then he kind of came back down and did his normal production, which was 2 catches, 23 yards. He's probably more of, the GPP guy here, but this defense the secondary is so bad. You can consider him. However, he's priced at 4.7. So I'd much rather go down and look at Jarrett at 4.5, who's more of a known commodity, or who I think is the most productive and the easiest for Baby 2 to throw to as his tight end in Okongwu. And then Fleming, who, they both wear red shirts and there was confusion about the Fleming. Some people accidentally played him, but he had a better game. He had the 5 catches for 38 yards, and he's actually had 4+ catches in 3 straight. So with the injuries to Jones and Demas and things of that nature, Marcus Fleming at 4K is playable in this matchup. He's kind of getting the short routes where Jarrett is, going to have the deep ball. Wouldn't surprise me to see that. And then, Okonkwo is kind of the safety valve. So you want to pair with one of those 3. Carrier is the most expensive, and he could very well be the guy that ends up producing, but on paper or within your build, it doesn't make sense to pay that for him when you can go 700 cheaper to Fleming or 500 cheaper to Okonkwo. So this is another tailor-made stack of, if you want to run Kenny Walker, come back with Baby Tua and a receiver or 2, and like you said, stack it up. Very easy to fit those 2 quarterbacks, and then you see what salary you have left. Maybe you can go get Knighton, or we've highlighted a couple of options here. You maybe had some interest in Zamir White, Treshaun Ward. There's definitely value here. So that's the slate. I don't want to put you on the spot, so I'll go first to give you time to think, but you probably already have it. I'll give a 3-man core, and that may change. I'll be releasing my main slate breakdown in the morning, so it probably will be similar to this. But as far as like my main team, and that's generally my single entry, cash games, double ups, head-to-heads, all that, I'm looking at Baby Tua as my quarterback. Braylon Allen, I know you made very valid points about the big field GPPs and stuff, but it's just the matchup it's like I said, I'm such a believer in that matchup that I'm going to go there. And then as far as my third, it's got to be, there's a lot of cheap options, but I'm going to go with the known commodity, David Bell. I was all over him last week. Anytime he's under 7K, I just think you got to play him. And those guys may end up being chalky. I'm hoping that people are too scared off of Tua, Baby Tua at this point. I want to call him regular Tua, but he's not, just because of all the bad games he's had. But yeah, this matchup, I mean, Aiden O'Connell was like 9% in cash last week, or even smaller and more, like single entry stuff. So this is just one of those matchups where everyone is going to eat. If McNamara from Michigan can have that kind of game where he threw for over 300 and 20 plus fantasy points, then Tagovailoa can definitely do that as well. So those are my 3. If you're I know they'll be at least different from my running back, but what's your 3-man core looking like right now?
Well, two of the 3 are the same.
Okay. That's fair.
And I'll give you one guess as to who the running back is.
It's Henderson, right? Let's go.
Yeah. So just to recap, if people are catching up a little bit late, it would be Baby Tua at quarterback. And by the way, that's like a Baby Tua 1A, O'Connell 1B situation. Like I don't see Baby Tua as an immensely greater option than O'Connell, but he just has the matchup, and I really do like that. Baby Tua at quarterback, Henderson at running back. Above all else, don't care about price, don't care about ownership, don't care about anything. Henderson is going to just absolutely smash. And then David Bell is 1,500 too cheap, and will get a ton of volume because they'll be chasing points. Maybe not as many points as Vegas thinks, but they will be chasing points, and he will get a ton of volume.
Yeah. And just if people are because people were trying, and all kind of play worked out, and people were kind of just, him and Han about the quarterbacks against this defense. When they faced a relevant quarterback, I mean, back against Western Kentucky, they gave up, the 488-3 to our guy, Lord Bailey Zappi. Against Miami, that I think they had King then. He threw for 388 and 2. Obviously, we saw McNamara throw for almost like 300 plus. I think it was almost 400, 3 touchdowns. O'Connell over 500. So, Baby Tua still has the capability and the talent to tear up this defense, and we've seen him do it against lesser defenses. He's just been having a streak of tougher defenses lately.
And they didn't price him up for this matchup that is so nice. I mean, like if he was at 7,500, we would have to think about
it. Yeah.
We still might play him, but we would have to think about it. We don't have to think about it because the price is where it is.
Yeah, and it's like they're literally the third week in a row where it's like we get another cheap guy who's kind of underperforming against Michigan State. Here's the get right spot. Let's go with it.
Exactly.
All right. So that's that. I just want to go over some prize picks real quick because I got we do have people that watch or listen or follow us that are into the prize picks. Now I know Michigan's defense is tough. And this is one that just kind of stuck out to me right away though, but Sean Clifford's passing yards are 194.5. I have to believe that with Dotson, he's capable to throw for 200 at least against Michigan. Would you be totally against that? I mean, if it was like 250, I'd say no, but 194.5 seems kind of low, right?
For any starting quarterback anywhere, 194.5 seems kind of low. He has a great receiver, the best receiver on the slate according to DraftKings in Dotson. Yeah, I think that seems low. I would probably say up to like 212 is where I would take the over, right? And then I'd have to start thinking about it. But yeah, 194 definitely seems low.
And then how about, since at the beginning of the show you mentioned Letty having, he could have a nice game here. They have his rushing yards at 79.5. Does that feel like an over to you? I mean, if he's gonna have like a semi breakout, his last two of his last three, he's been close to that.
So I'm not a huge PrizePicks guy, but is that a first half total or is
that's it? That's for the game. That's for the game.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna take the over.
Okay. Yeah. No, they're soft. Honestly, their college football totals are soft.
Also in the first half and maybe in the first quarter.
All right, I love it. I love it. I thought you might be on all over that, so serve that one up. I love it. And then let me see. Let me just pull up usually reception. So I will say with PrizePicks, since you probably are in a state that's not, I'm guessing, not legal. That's why you don't play it. Their football and NFL, whatever, I guess it's kind of soft, but college football, they're habitually soft on a lot of these, but their college basketball PrizePicks are super accurate, and they tend to be on NBA too. Whatever they run system wise, they're really accurate at basketball, but football, especially college, we've been able to crack them a few times. So like that those two that I gave you, yeah, they seem really low. How about, oh my God, they made Jarrett Stern's 10.5 receptions. I wouldn't say that. That's really shocking to see. I mean, he could. How about these Ohio State guys? So if you think it's going to be, this would be a tricky one then. If Henderson's going to run a lot, they have Chris Olave at 5 receptions. Ordinarily, I might say, oh yeah, he'll hit that, but he might not, right?
Okay, so that one is not like snap call for me the way the first two were. It's definitely possible, and I do think there's a little bit of a, hey guys, I'm the man, I'm gonna need the ball this game kind of thing that's gonna happen in the passing game from Olave, and he also does have a little bit of the shorter route tree in the offense. So like, if they need that first down on 3rd and 7, that's probably an Olave play. Although last week it was JSN.
Yeah.
A lot of mouths to feed in that offense. Don't know that they're going to have to throw a ton. It was 5 or 5.5. You said
5, just straight 5. Yep.
He probably gets there, but that's like a 60-40 thing.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I wanted to throw one that was kind of more of a tougher one for it, just to see. That wouldn't be one that I would put in my highlighted at the end, but I was just curious because it's like a borderline play.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's good. The article, like I said, for main slate and the 2-game slate that's happening tomorrow, there's a little Friday appetizer for us. We'll be up in the morning, CBB stuff as well, and then I have a parlay picks piece that I do as well that's coming out for free. As you guys see on the ticker there, we are offering 20% off if you use the code DUB, D-U-B, for signing up. There's that gold package, which is all the college football, esports, college basketball. I think NHL's in that one. It's all the niche sports, that we are niche guys. We all stick together. I appreciate everyone who watched live. Looks like there's a few of you. And then if you're watching on demand, just hit the like button underneath. That helps us get our stuff seen within the YouTube world. Jake, I really appreciate this. If I would have figured this out sooner, we would have got some shows in a little bit sooner, but we still have 2-3 weeks left and bowl games. So I would definitely like to do, a couple more regular season shows and then maybe some kind of, bowl preview we can put together if you have some time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This was a good time. I'm glad to hop on here. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. All right, everybody. That is the show. Lots of stuff going on. Make sure that you get in that Discord if you are already a sub. Like I said, the news tonight on CBB, there was a 35% owned guy who didn't even play. So very, very important. He's Jake. I'm Walt. Take care, guys. Thanks. See ya.